Hey guys, welcome back to the Pivotal Show. I'm your host, Farooq Ahmed. I am a productivity and optimization coach. I talk about inspiration and motivation in another podcast that I host with my wife. And today is a special show. I'm pretty sure all of you are going to enjoy it because just before the shoot, we have already enjoyed it for a very long time. Finally, we're starting off with the episode. So, welcome.
Hey everybody, my name is Zohair Heather. I am the founder of Digital Street and I'm a recent entrepreneur. Got another venture that I'm working on as well. And today's episode I'm very excited about as well. We've had a lot of fun and I can't wait for Abe to tell you who we have next, even though you can see him right there. So if you know him.
Hey everybody, my name is Abe Seksuk and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I know we talked last time about not mentioning the word serial entrepreneur, but I'm going to keep saying it until the end of the season, until I come up with something else. I am also the CEO of Rainmaking. We're a venture a studio where we help companies build ventures. And I've done many other things, obviously, but today I'm really excited to talk to Gary. Gary is a partner at Lane Ventures, and he's person also responsible for bringing Techstars to the UAE. I know he's worked with a lot of early startups, and he's had his own ventures and investments. So I'm looking forward to have this conversation with you, Gary.
No, thank you. Looking forward to just starting this conversation with you guys right now.
Yes,
The first time.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with our topic today is really having fun while keeping the boat afloat, I guess. So give us your highlights. Some of the tips that you've worked with some of the founders, or you've helped companies do that, because in stressful times we need something to keep things more appealing to the employees. It has to drive them somehow, and you have to have some fun as well. So give us some ideas. Let me know your thoughts about this topic.
Sure. Well, look, I think there is the culture and fun. Everyone is a permanent fixture with a chair, and everyone starts buying green screens now so that we can have fun with our backgrounds. And culture building, when we're all in the same room, I think is different than culture building when everyone is remote. So I think those are almost like two separate topics that that we can cover. I think let's do the COVID one now, because for better or worse, this is a new reality, and maybe a lot of companies will find that, hey, maybe remote is better. Maybe not paying for the office lets us hire a couple of extra people a year. Maybe there's other efficiencies that we can discover. I think the most kind of pertinent piece of advice that I've heard, and it's not mine, but I've been parroting, is from Matt Mullenweg, so founder of Automatic, the guys that make WordPress. And, he talks about how organizations kind of transition from kind of, all right, we're a physical, normal company with normal management and we do normal things. And then we become a remote enabled organization, and people kind of keep doing the same stuff. As in, they will have a meeting and everyone will hop on a Zoom, and then they will do kind of the meeting updates. And, his recommendation, and, something that I think works really well, is that, companies need to really cherish the personal stuff, right? It's, for those of us that have been on Zooms for like 4 or 5 hours a day, there is fatigue around doing this, all the time. And so, as a, CEO, you're like a coach of a sports team, right? You need to keep people's, mental state, in the best possible place. And so the advice is do the meeting updates and things that can be written out asynchronously, and use the Zoom time, the Hangouts time around Tandem, whatever piece of software you use for this stuff, it doesn't really matter. Use that to say, hey, what did you guys do last weekend? Let's have one of our teammates teach us a skill. Let's, just have a conversation as normal humans, and basically import those water cooler fun moments and try to create a space for that. that people feel comfortable, so that the Zoom is not the dreaded meeting. Because at least in a physical meeting, if it's not a topic you're totally excited about, you get to see your coworkers, and hopefully, if you're not, in a completely crappy environment, you actually like them. And there's the chat before and there's the chat after. Maybe you guys go for lunch. And since all of that is missing, I think it's important to bring a lot of that, back in some sort of planned way. And that's, I think that is the number one advice that I've heard or seen. It's try to accept that the new reality means there have to be new paradigms around communication, and attempting to do all the same stuff doesn't work all that well. Zoom happy hours work pretty well, but then it's kind of just bizarre to have, 20, 30 people just drinking and, in front of a screen for a while. I think it's worked really well when people were really quarantined together. But as, different parts of the world are starting to semi-open up, we have this odd dynamic where we're social within a small circle of friends, but then we're still almost in that same quarantine mode during the day. And so I think that really weighs on people, and creating opportunity for people to communicate always works.
I agree.
I think it's more like a deliberate effort these days because of this of the stress around COVID and or staying afloat in these difficult times. But it's also related to what we talked about in one of the earlier episodes about mental health as well. Everything comes together, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
But Gary, what tips, if there could be any, would you give in terms of actually creating or shifting from a sort of a boring run-of-the-mill kind of culture into a fun and more creative culture in an organization? A lot of organizations are that's traditionally, very, very stiff-collared kind of organizations. Will that help in building sort of a fun culture in the organization, or it could go south as well?
Look, I mean, culture is like a mirror of leadership, right? So if you have, the top brass of an organization that are super formal, people are not going to feel comfortable, being loose and relaxed and fun around that, right? So, if you, again, back in pre-COVID days, if you have like a sports team and you want people to participate, you kind of need, someone in the C-suite, or, the team leads to go and, be the first person on the field. If you want to go and play dodgeball and bounce, as a team, it has to be the founders doing this stuff. I think the idea of, showering your team with perks and saying like, oh, it's culture, it doesn't really work. What works is, leadership that's highly engaged. And, it could be around anything. It could be around, doing something, meaningful in your community. It could be around cooking. It could be around sports. It could be around art. I think it's, smart to have some sort of structured schedule if that is something that you believe is important for your organization in terms of social activities. But also, it's valuable to set that tone from the top because, we're all in startup land, right? And so for a very, very long time, everyone reports to the founders. But then, assuming the company becomes successful, man, you'll start getting hires who maybe you haven't interviewed as the founder. And that it is critically important then that the hiring manager of that person and the team lead that person is going to be reporting into on a daily, weekly, whatever it is basis, that they are able to, pass down, the kind of organization that you're seeking to create to everyone that they're working with. And so it's, this is the kind of stuff that starts from day one. And we've seen all of the crazy news of people being super stressed out over the past year or so, and organizations, saying, oh, the culture here is horrible, et cetera. And, look, I think it's a little bit rough on the founders that get the rap there, because I think running a company is extremely difficult, and that has its own mental challenges. But regardless, it is up to the executive team to set the tone. Whether it's in productivity, whether it's adopting tools, companies that got on Slack are the ones where the founders were like, this is great, everyone is using this, not where, a couple of people in some random department started slowly making their way through. Sure, that's how it spreads these days. But, if you're early to anything as an organization, it's because the management sets the tone that it's okay to try stuff. And culture is the same way too. And whether that is very wellness oriented and it's, everyone is into meditation and yoga, or it's a frat house party culture, both of those things come from the top.
Yeah. So have you seen anything, have you seen like a rigid, or let's just not call them rigid. Have you seen like an old-fashioned family business or even a small startup or suddenly changed during COVID, implementing a couple of more fun little items, even like smaller things? Because I was like, I'll give you an example. I'm helping this company, this very family-oriented business. We brought them in on Slack, which was like they're a couple of guys that they're into retail, but then when we brought Slack, and this was like mind-blowing technology for them, right? And then like last week I told them, instead of everybody having the logo of the company as their avatar, why don't you express yourself, right? And the guys some of them do watch the show, and they'll know what I'm talking about. But so like express yourself, and suddenly I got bombarded with like 30 emails saying, like, is this acceptable? What do you mean? Because especially Slack is not customer facing, right? It's a pure internal collaboration tool, right? But this company never thought this way, right? Well, and they were telling me, I'm like, I don't know, what's your favorite animation character? When you were a kid, what did you watch? What I mean? Like anything, like I can't believe I'm telling, like, it's just because it's not something that they're used to. And I think that's something that you touched on. It has to be, there's nothing wrong with what I'm trying to say is there's nothing wrong with adding a couple of these, fun little things at work that would create that.
Yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like some people are so scared and that, you're not the first person to mention the water cooler situation, because that is something that I kind of miss, because I did a lot of work, but a lot of times you'd see me walking between meetings because I need to talk to people and, find out how everybody's doing and the wellness. And that's a part of how I do things, but that's a part that I really miss. And now you ask people to jump on a Zoom call and they think that you're going to give them something. And I'm like, no, we're just, having a catch up, exactly. Like, and that's something that is, but have you seen that happen with other companies, especially in the startups that you're kind of overlooking or kind of talking to in any kind of capacity?
No, I mean, I've found that, companies that were kind of rigid, they're still rigid, but companies that, always had kind of this internal openness of communication, whether it was on Slack or in person in a casual work environment, they will find that, they will discover, how to best behave online quicker. And so it's companies with a, culture of silliness almost internally and open communication will generally adopt to new forms of internal collaboration easier because they're not set in their ways, right? And so, for many companies, it was a big hit. I was talking with Nitin Chopra. I mean, I don't know if you guys have had him on the show. I think he'd be actually, really good. So he was the CTO at Dubai Holding, and they were going through this fairly prolonged migration to Office 365. But then quarantine hit, and they logged thousands upon thousands of video hours on Microsoft Teams, and people loved it, and they were so productive. But there was a forcing function there. And so can situations like this create forcing functions for companies to start communicating differently? And can the nature of that communication, change the ways that companies cooperate? Absolutely. I think that's possible. Can cultures change as a result of that? Oh, man, I think it's really tough. I think also more traditional companies operate with kind of like this fear of people potentially losing their jobs, as opposed to high growth, especially venture-backed companies operate under we must retain the best talent. And so, the power dynamic in a large traditional company where the average worker is not as kind of unit economic productive as an average employee of a technology startup, just that dynamic is completely different. And so you can create a really, shitty situation in a company of like 10 people where you just spent an incredible amount of capital, time, and the equity of the company just to bring those people on board. It's not in your best interest to do that versus organizations that have many thousands of people and they churn quite actively. Churn is significantly, more painful for an early stage company than it is for a big one.
Yeah.
That's actually, I really like, what you're saying about the buy-in from the team as well. And I want to pick up on an earlier point that you mentioned about the way that actual team time is used, like during a session. I mean, and I think this is really interesting, this piece about companies changing culture suddenly because of COVID. And I think a lot of them, if they've done anything, it's out of necessity because of the dire need to sort of, it's a fight or flight kind of a situation. But I think even then, unless they do it with, with a cognizant mind that we need to do it right, or, bring someone in who's an expert who can actually help us make that shift, it's going to be very hodgepodge and, might make a mess of things as well. But I think you're right that companies that have this kind of like directional sense of good engagement and culture would probably just move further into that direction or have a desire and then implement it. I want to quickly touch on ourselves, our own business, like what we've been recently doing. In fact, it's quite pertinent because the timing is interesting. So I've been a big fan of like team meetings, right? And I try and keep them, I try and structure them in a way that they're succinct, like 3 most important things that you've done, what was on your plate last week, what are the things that are on your plate for the next week, and just kind of like 5 minutes and done, right? But it never ends up that way because someone's got longer updates. I usually have the longest, so it's almost like FaceTime is imbalanced, but it's also very boring because most people don't really care. And for me, in my mind, it was always like, it's a good way for everyone to kind of know what everyone else is doing and see where the overlaps are. And so my co-founder, she stepped in and she's like, you know what, these things aren't working. And for years we've tried it and it's just like always met with resistance. And so she basically gutted them and she said, we're going to do something entirely different. And I think it's so interesting you say what you did, Gary, because literally like about 2 weeks ago, we eliminated the concept of team meetings and we basically put them outside. So we capture all of that activity, in our like time management tools or project tools like Asana. And the team calls are basically like, it's like a virtual game of Twister. Every call is just like a fun exercise. It's like a get to know somebody else. And we've learned so many things. And she said very interestingly, most of the people, we're a 5-year-old company. We've had people as long as 4 years working with us, right? Who are still with us. And so we've been able to create that stickiness. But she's like, how many of you know how many siblings I have? And nobody could answer that question except me, of course. And
that's
she's
good.
Like, I know, thank God for that. And nobody could answer that. And she's like, case in point, we need to actually learn. We need to know who each other are. And turns out that our UI UX person is like, she's a champion winning golfer. And I love golf. And I didn't know that. And I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, how can we have many dimensions of actually having side conversations and then the water cooler chat, and I missed that a lot, like Abe said as well. But it's just such an interesting situation we're in. But how can you recreate that? How can people, and I come from a mindset where you need to balance that stuff out. But even for me, it was hard to do. And it must be like such a challenge for people to sort of, but the need to have fun. I don't know. Like, I mean, let's talk about Taco Stars a little bit. I want to know where that came from. What is it? Why is it?
I think maybe we need to define what Taco Star is first before.
Sure.
Taco and a star came together.
Sure. So in 2018, so we inked the partnership with Techstars in 2017 to bring them to Dubai. So we launched the Accelerator in 2018. So the first companies arrived in January, and Techstars globally has a kind of monthly happy hour called, I think it's like second Thursday of every month. For for a number of reasons, is that like our MD Vijay is awesome. And it's fantastic as a mentor to the entrepreneurs and delivers outstanding content. I absolutely love working with him for the time, for the couple of years that we did. But, he is not going to, babysit a 40, person in their 20s and 30s happy hour. And so, instead of having kind of like a Techstars branded one, especially because we had some sensitivities around the fact that, we're a family office that's fairly conservative, and we couldn't provide official budget for this, for the Accelerator. I decided to do a kind of like a pun on the Techstars name, and I called it Taco Stars, because I really love this restaurant called Muchachas that just opened at the time, I think in 2018. And I'm like, hey, let's just do a margarita night. So I, went to a Halloween store and found the largest sombrero that I could find. That is still with me. And, we started with, just the founders of the Techstars companies. And, that was like our monthly, let's blow off some steam. Everyone is always, running business is hard. Running a startup, in this region, fundraising, hitting metrics, the sales cycle is different here, all the things that you guys already know. And so, people, for those that partake, want to blow off some steam, and that was perfectly fine. And so we had these kind of group deals, and we would take over the restaurant, and it slowly went from, 30 people, 40 people to being kind of a thing where, hey, let's go invite the WAMDA guys, the 500 guys, let's get other accelerators in. Let's try to get the investors to come over. And so now, the WhatsApp group is like 120 people. The broadcast list is around 300 people, and it's, all the usual suspects, right? So if they've participated in a program, here in Abu Dhabi, of all sorts, or kind of been generally around the quote unquote ecosystem, they've probably been to the event at some point in time. Our biggest one was, the demo days were always really big, but the one this February was, probably the largest one we've done. We went to capacity of muchachas, which is always fun to do with everyone who I think it's always fun to do. What's been bizarre is obviously canceling it as the physical event, March going on to now. And usually I've taken the summer off just because I'm physically not here. And now I'm thinking, all right, things are back. Do I relaunch it in September? Some people have concerns. Some people, based on what's going on in Dubai, some people really don't have any concerns because restaurants are booked for like a day or two in advance for the ones that are popular, right? And how do you continue building that community, while things, while everyone's remote? And I've tried doing just visiting people in smaller amounts. We've had a open video chat on Tandem that some people really liked. I found it extremely difficult to convert people from being very present in the event to being active in the WhatsApp group. So definitely there at the event, never goes to the WhatsApp chat. From being in the WhatsApp chat to actually talking to people, and then converting people off the WhatsApp group into another space, that really did not work out. So we went, I don't know, like 30, 40 people maybe signed up for the Tandem chat, and maybe 5 use it with any on any regular basis. And same thing for like the perks. We have a perks page, and there's discounts on stuff. No one really uses it. It's fine. I don't care. But what I think any community, whether it's a company, a social group, anything, will always follow the like Pareto principle, and you'll always only convert a certain small amount from the bigger group.
Yeah, I always like to bring in the corporate element as well in the conversation, and we've been so far talking about. So we've been talking about different startups and relatively smaller organization structure, but when we want to talk about large organization or larger organizations, 1,000+ employees, I think it's very important even for those line managers or group heads to individually make sure that they are making that cultural change propagate across the organization, because there's a huge glass ceiling between the management and the general staff. And like you said earlier, a lot of people are more focused towards saving their jobs, rather than trying to be funny or creative or even come up with ideas. They have a fear factor in them, right? So to add to that, I think it's not only the CEO or one person driving it. It has to come down. We've seen some teams have that element. Those are mostly those customer facing or kind of a reactionary team, like customer service teams and things like that, which are a little bit creative and fun loving, in my opinion, because they have to have that attitude. They have to reach out to customers. But the moment you step a little bit towards the back or middle management or that level, it's everything all dry and, serious as hell.
Like
yeah, I mean, I agree. I also think it's one of these situations where, I think the ultimate large corporate job, and if I ever kind of fall into that universe again, I would love to go and be like a chief digital officer of like a cool company, or chief innovation officer, because A, it's a completely bullshit title. No one actually knows what these people do. B, because it is almost like and it's a restructuring job. The fact that your organization needs a chief digital or chief innovation officer means that people don't know how to use computers, and like the CEO, the president, the head of product is not innovative in the very thing they're supposed to be doing for a living. So it's always like a fixing job, right? It's not a job where you can kind of you're in a steady state. And I think culture the same way. You can't really have a chief fun officer. People have like chief people officers, but those are kind of more around HR operations, right? But that the chief fun, like that, should permeate the organization in the same way that innovation or digital should permeate an organization. If you feel like you need to have you need to externalize the concept of fun or being decent human beings or innovation or digital, that is a problem that speaks more to the organization as a whole, where people don't feel comfortable unless it comes from that department to engage in behavior that's perfectly human and normal.
Agreed.
Yeah. So okay, I have a couple of stories about culture, because it's something that my first big startup in Jordan, to this day, I'm not involved I'm not involved day to day at all, but it has 1,700 employees. And how do you get these people, to come to work every day and stay in their seats and all that good stuff? So we had a couple of ideas, and I think 3 years into the company, we got a new client, and that client, his name was Dubizzle.com. Okay, so Dubizzle came with their own, fun sorts of like things, how we can bring in agents that would help, customers either, support the product or add any new content onto the site. Anyway, regardless, so a couple of years later, they asked me to join, so I joined Dubizzle.com, and that's where, it was kind of a shell shock. Keep in mind, before starting my company, I worked for a big telco in the US, and, has maybe 150,000 employees. So, and it was kind of fun working there, but it was still very rigid as a very, very corporate job. And now walking into Dubizzle and seeing like in 5 years, that whole transition, where the first thing they made us do is something called a Picha Kucha. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this term, where it's like a presentation. And,
7 slides, yeah.
You know what I mean? So we started doing it even in our accelerator for our founders. And you know what we found out the first time we run it? We had 2 people that went to the Olympics, 2 founders that went in either swimming or wrestling. We had a founder who won the million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You know what I mean? Yeah, like we had founders that were in like famous rock bands. We had like, and that's the stuff that I think companies miss out. They don't
wanna
know.
be rock bands.
Okay, or we always knew you were famous, folks.
Former rock band, you mean?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like these are the things that you would add, and like we had a person that kind of restores cars for a living, and so we created that culture of people. I know that's you too. We would anything,
I'm clearly
you
living the
go,
wrong life.
possibly. Maybe you need to get into more startups and forget your corporate job.
Someday.
But that's the thing. When you create that you create a community within your work culture, because then people would reach out to you for any other things. Like, they know Farouk is the car guy. I would, talk to Farouk about something I have issues with, and not having to post something on social media and getting trolled by your friends. I mean, like, yeah, where can I find a good person that fix brakes? And then I get tags on my Facebook saying Popeyes Arabia and all that stupid. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like,
Get a chicken sandwich while you're at it.
Technically they're all in gas stations right now, and then there's some kind of person there, but still, like, it's still. But that community feeling within an office really helps tremendously. Like, I found out in running a Pizza Kucha in one of the startups that I did, that we had a person that worked for us that had an identical twin. And not only that, she had 3 other sets of identical twins in the family. So they were 8 girls, and 4 of them are identical, sisters, and stuff like that. Like, that always opens up the conversation to get closer, because as you build rapport, I think people get closer and closer, and your talent, makes it a lot harder for people to start looking for jobs or change jobs. Just, money becomes an issue. Well, money is always an issue, but there's other issues that hinge that whole people exiting companies, because they're now, it is a second family, because you spend more time at work with coworkers than with your family. So
Yeah, and look, there's also something about kind of age and scale and inclusivity in terms of work culture. I mean, I've kind of previous life was in a B2B, content management streaming company, which was very much a sell hard, party hard kind of culture, which is not super inclusive or scalable. It's very similar culture in many ways to Vice Media, where I ran product for a little bit. Definitely a party hard culture. But in between, I was with this advertising agency in Brooklyn, and they had this fascinating approach, which I think A, scales well, B, is quite an interesting model that I think would recommend that other companies implement. So, instead of having the, founders or managers decide on here are the cultural activities that we're going to be doing, what they said is we're going to spend X% of our budget on quote unquote culture. And then as a new employee, you have committees. So you're told, hey, welcome to Carrot Creative, blah, blah, blah. You're going to be designer, project manager, blah, blah, blah. There are multiple committees that you can join. And so committees are funded groups that you can go and make. And so there's a committee. So those are typically the more senior people in the company. That's like an honor. If you're part of the committee, you are the one that gets to say, is this an appropriate committee to make or not? And then after that, you're like, hey, I want $500 a month to buy brisket and a grill so that we can put it on the balcony, and we'll make barbecue for the entire company once a month. And, we'll need a keg of beer and that. Hey, we want to hire a yoga instructor to come in and do something with us. We want to bring, we want to have a local musician come in and do like a small concert for the entire company, like once a quarter, and we need this amount of budget for it. And it's, we've had, baking clubs, and, a lot of it was food, social, fun, but a lot of it was like maker stuff. Like people would go and say, hey, let's go and, do like a, design for socks, and like make like a small like online sock company or something like that. And people would go and, basically like make a tiny company and produce a product and kind of get to exercise their entrepreneurial brains on a very small scale, but actually go and launch something. And that has resulted in, all sorts of just, whether it's applications or products or things that people could interact with. But it's a great way to not dictate culture, but really enable it in a very, very healthy way. Because if someone is passionate, they know, hey, the company will support my passion if I can find 2 other people to go and do something and I can stick with it for, a couple of months, then the company will always support me doing that. And I thought that was, super forward thinking. And as, the organization grew, the committees and what they were doing grew as well. And that was really cool to see.
It's
So
just
I
a matter
think
of
I think it's
asking
a
him.
great point. A lot of people feel bad in asking. And
and funny enough, the way to get something is not to, so the communication cadence, you'll find that most people will help if you just ask them right away. So like hey, do you have time for me, need a favor? And like all of that is just wasted space.